So you're a Latino writer who has been staffed on something and you bump up a couple times, right? You're now a mid-level writer and you get sent a set or something. Something goes wrong. You don't get a second chance.
Yeah.
Whereas, our regular guys or, our white guys will get 2 or 3. How many times have we seen somebody's movie bomb?
Right.
And they get 2 or 3 chances.
That's right.
Those things are not afforded to us.
This is very exciting. This is a very different special edition of the podcast. I wanted to take a moment and have some of these incredible women on who I've gotten to know throughout our intersection point with LatinaSquad, which has been a blessing in my life and I'm sure many of our lives. But I wanted to take this opportunity to just highlight some of the incredible work that you guys have been doing as creative execs, as producers who are leading the charge in keeping on, because it's hard out here for a pimp. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. So I'd love to just start with some quick intros.
I'm Erika Kennair. I am from a family where the Cubans that missed Miami went too far west to New Orleans. And I thought I was going to write kid shows. I wanted to do the next Pete and Pete or Clarissa, for those of us old enough to remember those shows. And as I started freelancing on those kid shows, I was getting notes on a cartoon, would a flea say that? Which nope. But artists can talk, so dream big. And the more I went through that, the more I realized the value of the other side of the desk. After getting a pretty significant award in screenwriting, transitioning my career to the executive side of things and the producing side of things. Now I get to ask the dumb questions, but it's been a very exciting journey from writing into post and then eventually into development. Now I run features and TV scripted content for the Mediapro Studio, which is a Madrid-based studio that's now opened up shop to start an English language LA-based office here.
My name is Sonia Almanza Gambaro. I'm first generation and 15th generation Latina, originally from Denver, Colorado. I moved out here to be the next Tracy Ullman. I was obsessed with Tracy Ullman growing up, and I just wanted to do comedy. And so came out here, was acting, waiting tables, all of that, stereotype, cliche, I guess. And I was also a DJ. And so I started DJing at night, and that piece of my career really took off, and to the point where I landed a job of being a DJ on a local TV show, and the program director of that network said to me one day, "You're getting so much fan mail. I'd like to give you your own segment." So
wow.
He said, "Here's Jerry, your camera guy. You got to figure out what you want to do, edit it up, turn it in on Thursday night. If I like it, I'll air it on Friday night." And he did. And he really liked it. So we started airing it on Sunday night. So from there, I just kind of fell into production and went from segment producing to event television to unscripted television. And then I was like, wait, how do I get to scripted? That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then I went back to school and kind of re-entered the business from the assistant level at an older age. I like to say I was the original younger, and I'm just immature. So, and now I'm an independent producer, and most recently ran 3POS Studios for Eugenio Derbez and Ben O'Dell for 5 years.
I'm Rocio Melara, first generation, born and raised here in LA. I was an only child, so definitely very strange. And I feel like I grew up relating to a lot of, I think, characters in TV who didn't necessarily look like me. And I felt like I was always trying to find those very weird and strange characters who look like me on screen. And at the same time, was the friend in the friend group who everyone came to for advice and was the planner. And so I think I really, got my feet wet and really got into this industry through commercials, on the ground, on set. I really wanted to produce and wanted to tell stories and kind of going through, different production houses. I finally landed with Lena Waithe at Hillman Grad and I think got closer to telling stories that were always my North Star, really finding those distinct points of views and finding those storytellers that were a little bit strange and that had, I think for me, when I was little, had, I think, those idiosyncrasies in sort of their storytelling that I wanted to see. And so, yeah, I was with Lena, for about 5 years, and now I'm independently telling stories and working as an independent producer.
It's always a fun reminder of all these very unique paths, and you start in one place thinking that that's where you're headed, and then you find all of these side quests along the way, and then you end up in a place that I don't think many expected. I think I've met a few people that are just I knew I wanted to do this, and this is how I did it, and I got there and they did it. But I love the origin stories of all of our careers, because it's just a reminder of we all know this, but every time we hear it, it solidifies that there's no one path to get anywhere, and we can use these unconventional starts of starting later as an assistant, or coming from commercials and the production side of things, or even having your background as a writer who then sort of transitioned over, how all of that then becomes your superpower in a lot of ways, your unique perspective beyond your identity, but your experiences and how they shape what you bring into the work and into the conversations. So for you guys, what part of this unconventional story that you've had so far, how did it prepare you for the executive suite, or this sort of wearing this producer hat that you stepped into?
So when I was starting out, there was a job I wanted more than anything. I was a temp on the Fox lot, and there was an open position to be an executive assistant to one of the executive producers of The Simpsons. And I went for that job super, super hard, and I did not get that job. And the job that I got, that was a temp assignment that turned long-term, was a post-production coordinator at Fox Searchlight. And at the time, wanting to go into children's television, I was like, whoops, right? I have fallen off the course, but I was 22 with a 401k, which was pretty exciting as well.
Very exciting.
And so I went into post-production and then ended up at Searchlight in the time of, Sideways and Napoleon Dynamite. The last thing I worked on was Little Miss Sunshine. And in post, you're where the buck stops, right? Yeah. And so I was in post on these amazing films where the priority was the filmmaker's vision, but they still had to have commercial value, except a few that made $1 million. But, for us, being able to know what it's like repeatedly in post and know that it all comes back to the script and the prep and the planning, I feel like now when I read scripts, I read them like I'm watching a cut. And so I know I'm not the only executive out there that does this, but I feel like more than other people, I might be like, you've written no establishing shots into this. We're going to end up on Getty Images trying to put establishers in this.
Yeah.
Or saying, we're coming into this scene way too late. And so I think that, or way too soon, but having that post-production background, which I did not expect to be something that helped with my career, actually has been one of my secret superpowers throughout.
Interesting.
I'll say that I couldn't imagine doing this job without having the life experience that I had. I know that a lot of people can do it. I was a very well-read kid, but, working as a DJ, working as a segment producer, having to work with the wackiest characters in all different corners of this city and other cities around the country, and observing people and seeing how they act and hearing how they talk and all of that, and just kind of examining that human condition that we all talk about really has informed my abilities to develop story and a character forward story. And I'll also say that as my time as a DJ, what was so helpful about that is because in a lot of ways you're always part of the production, the physical production of things, and you're also I'm working right there with Doris Roberts or Bruce Valanche or Jay Moore and all of these really big comedians that I was really excited about. And you just, after a while, you get used to it. And I think that's important as a producer as well, just to be able to talk to your talent and not be starstruck.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
They're just people just like us. And, the therapy and the event planning, all that stuff, it works absolutely. Can you guys share, anyone can answer this one, a specific first that felt really significant in your career as a producer or as an executive? Was it a first green light, a first time in a room, a first major win?
The first time I sold a movie just on the phone. And it wasn't even written. It was just an idea.
That doesn't happen anymore
That
at
doesn't
all.
happen. Wow.
Congratulations.
Good old days.
Yeah, those days are over.
Everything.
Hopefully they'll come back.
Totally
right?
done.
Fingers crossed.
Come back.
It was just the right moment. It's like timing is so crucial in this business. People don't think about it, but it's part of the reason why I think we're always talking to buyers constantly, because it's just you have to be able to strike at the right moment.
Yeah.
And Netflix really liked this writer and just called him up and said, "Hey, Carrie has this idea, yada, yada, yada." And they're like, "Okay, great. We'll send an offer." And I was like, oh my gosh, that was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think for me, we were very new with our Amazon deal. And, obviously, being with Lena, they come to us because we were supporting up and coming writers. And so, we'd come to them with this futuristic sci-fi idea. We were supporting this new up and coming writer, and we sold that idea in the room. And that for me was something that I'd only heard of, So that was really exciting to be able to come in fresh into a deal and to be able to sell an idea with, an up-and-coming writer and with someone that we truly believed in. Coming out of that room and being able to celebrate with him and to be able to, then him being like, what's next?
Yeah.
And
Is there a piece of conventional wisdom you feel like you had to unlearn to succeed as you started to kind of climb the ranks and understand the dynamics, hierarchies, infrastructure, politics of the executive side?
I mean, when I was at Paradigm, there was this culture of fear, don't stay in your lane, don't cross it, and go and talk to these people or those, you basically play a role, play your position. And, so I was learning the ropes and just kind of stayed in my lane for about 6 months. And then I realized that's not going to help. That's just not me, And so I think, don't believe that you just have to play small. Just go ahead and be yourself,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, wait to be invited to the room, or wait to be invited to the table. That invitation will not come. And there's always the idea of I need to wait to be seen. And sometimes, depending on the volume of what you have going on, where your projects are at, or, depending on what you have in production, or just where the company is at in that moment, realistically, unfortunately, the boss at the top is not thinking about inviting, the CE or inviting the younger exec to whatever is next. And I think it's about, waiting for the right time, but believing in yourself to ask, coming in and being this is why I think I should join, or these are some of the notes, or this is a project that, I'm on, or just coming in prepared. Sometimes there is but I didn't get invited.
Right.
But
well, there's a proactiveness that one has to have, but it's such a fine dance of knowing when you're actually ready. Amy Bear said this when she was on the podcast once, that I'm stealing was when she was coming up, it was you're welcome to everything, but invited to nothing. You have to constantly be playing this game or advocating for yourself, but knowing where the boundaries are and the limitations are. Because if you do get in that room and you're not ready to be in that room, you don't have many opportunities to show up and impress and kind of rise, in the ranks and whatnot. So I didn't come up on that side. So for me, it's always fascinating to learn. It's Entourage, It's watching all the players and they tell me their lived experiences, and I just have my own imagination of what that must have been like. But yeah, I mean, was it ever a big thing, I guess, for you guys coming up, being that only woman in the room or the only Latina in the room early on in your career? Was that a big a big thing you had to navigate, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would get dusted off and taken out whenever the National Hispanic Media Coalition would come in to do their yearly surveys, right?
And here's a Latina. We have one.
Yeah, I just like,
do you want some churros?
Yeah.
It's like, that's not even.
No, I just put on my Carmen Miranda hat, served them fruit. But no, I think, it's interesting because I was at several of my jobs the only woman and the only, I know I'm the palest shade of Latina, but like I was, and so I had to learn how to navigate what could sometimes it cut both ways, where sometimes it was a burden on the sense of, speak for millions of people, and it's like there's very different people involved. Or on the flip side, like a toy or a trophy to be like, we got one. And I think that even sometimes when people were well intended, there could be the idea of, not understanding how different every single woman is very different. Every single man is very different. What I really had to speak up towards was like, yes, I grew up watching Sábado Gigante, but like I also grew up wanting to be Lloyd Kaufman from Trauma. Right? And explaining that. And what was really exciting was, especially when I was at comedy at ABC, and it was a great time for us with like Blackish and the Goldbergs and Fresh Off the Boat. And it was so amazing because none of those families were Latino, but Beverly Goldberg was as close to a Cuban mom as I've ever met, right? And Constant Wu's character clipped coupons as hard as my mom. And I think that it became about pushing the universality and how we all came together as opposed to the otherness. And that was always a goal that I really set out to do.
Yeah. It feels like we're entering a season of having to remind folks again of that universality, right? It's certainly a different market now.
For some reason, I never felt like it was a big factor in anything but I remember, I won't say the showrunner and I won't say where I was working, but there was a moment where I was kind of plucked out of obscurity, just at my desk minding my own business. And they're like, oh, hey, you're Latino, right? Yep. Go in there into the office and tell such and such showrunner about quinceañeras. I'm like, okay. and that was, there's been a few things since then, but for the most part, I feel like, I don't know, I'm like kind of more focused on how systemically it affects all of us instead of just me. I feel like for whatever reason, I can verbally spar with somebody if I have to. Yeah.
How do we then handle balancing like storytelling, right, and business strategy when we are projects that elevate our culture specifically and elevate diverse voices, Latino voices specifically within the umbrella of Latinidad?
I think, unfortunately, I don't know if this is an obnoxious answer, but I think we have to casually strive towards excellence with them, right? But I think you have to let them be what they are, because I think a lot of times, like, and no offense to anyone who has this pitch or who, but like, there's a lot of, oh no, Poppy's going to sell the tamale stand, right? Or border crossing stories. And there are some beautiful ones, like La Misma Luna, like, is an amazing movie. Yeah. But I think that when you see The Last of Us, when you see Lincoln Lawyer, right? Like, I think the best thing that I can do from my position is, again, back to the universal nature of it, right? Like, everybody loves Pedro Pascal for so many reasons, right? Like, and finding those ways to supersede, just like, I know that obviously Olivia Rodrigo is Filipino and not Latino, but like, what, like, that girl is teen angst and pop bubbles and all of these wonderful things. And I think it's finding those ways to supersede past the individual. The show Beef, I think, is a fantastic example of that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think it's looking at how to, again, build out and to take those core specific truths, but then find how that connects to the world at large.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I also will add that authenticity is the best algorithm, and you can't program it. And we should just look at like the music industry. I worked in the music industry as well, and it's nothing about ethnicity or color kind of factors into whether or not somebody's going to be for a specific group. If you happen to like that person, doesn't matter what your background is, that's great, and they're very happy about it. I feel like just kind of breaking down those antiquated like barriers over here, and quite honestly, back when I was at Televisa USA, we had spent a bunch of money on a McKinsey study that essentially just said that, Latinos just want to be seen on camera and as part of the American fabric. There's nothing more than that. So like Lincoln Lawyer, Will Trent, those sort of spaces where we're just included with everybody else is all folks want. We don't need to come in with like breakfast burritos. But if you do come in with breakfast burritos, definitely come to me first.
I think it's about being a part of the bigger conversation and not necessarily putting Latina stories or necessarily needing to put Latina stories into their own niche or lane.
Yeah.
Because our stories, the authenticity of them, I think it organically makes them universal,
Yeah. Are there any shifts in Latino representation that you guys have been a part of or have witnessed that you're proud to have influenced in some way?
I mean, one of mine was a flight attendant casting Rosie Perez, and who obviously is a goddess. And so that was a nerd awestruck moment just in general to be around Rosie Perez. But I think that the idea for that was her character was in no way a stereotype. Her character was a mom who gets in way over her head with North Korean spyware and ends up accidentally killing a guy. And if that did or didn't make it in the cut, if not, spoilers. But we kept pulling it in and putting it out. But, I think that it was really fun to have that character be she wasn't Kaylee's sassy friend coworker, right? She had her own stuff going on. And it was amazing to see that spread out because, not to spoil anything, but when Kaylee's character thought that everything was closing in on her, she realized that the Fed that was actually there was there because of what Rosie had been doing the whole time, and that they had been tracking Rosie. And the Feds just happened to show up at the right moment because there was also a bad murder plot happening. But it was really exciting to have, and to see, because Steve was, Steve's amazing. Steve is not Latino. And Steve put so much into Rosie's character and that story. And it was amazing. And then the next season, she was on the run because she had messed up.
Right.
And it was that I was really proud to see such a rich, dynamic story that, yes, it's Rosie who is undeniably Latina, but that she wasn't there to be sassy or to provide commentary. She was there having her own story and could have been its own entire show with or without the rest of the stuff that was happening.
Right. It's a role that's just a great role that's written for a great actor. And then the person that happens to be cast, who's the right person for the job, happens to be Latina and happens to bring that authenticity of who they are into the role. And then it brings a full dynamic thing. But it wasn't like, on the breakdown, it's like we need to have a Latina to fill this role, right? It's just like when you create characters that are complex and dynamic and you find the best person, and not just characters, but all across the board of the lanes that we do, I think that's when you get to have those experiences that we can create for others that feel almost like transcendent, even though it shouldn't. That should be like the normalized way that we do things, but we know that that's not how things work behind the scenes often, because you have to look at like numbers and pool and who this metrics of people and their value and all of that fun stuff that we also have to deal with that makes it harder to sometimes fight for that. So I'm glad that you got to have like that battle that you won, I guess, in a way. Not that it was a battle.
It wasn't even, we all, she came in and we're like, yeah.
She's great. Yeah. No, and that's amazing because obviously that was a huge show. So that matters, right? That matters because it's a huge show and many people got to experience that on a subconscious level. It impacts how we
Yeah.
see things. Yeah. Sonia, so with producing 4 seasons of Acapulco, I would love for you to talk us through a little bit, like, what exactly does a producer executive do to shepherd a show like that throughout 4 seasons?
Absolutely. So I think, for the first season, it was a lot of digging into that first script and figuring out how the second and the third scripts were going to go and continue building out this world and these great characters. And because they ordered 3 scripts. It was first, they ordered the pilot to be written, then they ordered 2 more scripts. So we had, freelance writers come in and do those 2 scripts along with our creators, and essentially kind of got Apple pregnant, before they ordered us to series. And I think just staying the course and, and previously in my experience, I had seen people just kind of go from like the pilot and then to the order, and so this was something I learned from watching Erika Kennair specifically, who is extremely tenacious, just kind of keep going, and very instrumental in kind of keeping Apple's attention, and then saying like, okay, well, how about we see how these characters are going to continue, and those 2 scripts ended up getting us the order, and then through the process after that, it's story area for every episode, and then making sure that we wrapped it up in a way that could feel satisfactory to an audience if we had to end right there, but was still open enough to leave the door open for a second season. And I think that's something that's different in streaming than broadcast, because you have used to have such long orders in broadcast. And so now there's so much time in between the seasons that you don't know what's going to happen. So you kind of, you want to respect your audience and be able to like give them something to be happy with at the end of it all, and like kind of finish a bit of the story. And so I think at the end of every writer's room, we were all kind of, on the edge of our seat, like, are they going to order us a little bit early? Can we get any sort of inkling so that we know before they wrap that 10th script, how we might be able to develop things differently for the next season?
And it seems like you did get enough lead time, because you guys were getting, to get 4 seasons nowadays feels like a miracle,
We didn't get ordered on any of them until after the season had aired.
Wow.
So it was like at least 1 or 2 or 3 episodes going before we started hearing those sort of decisions. If I remember correctly, 3rd and 4th season, they did order the room. And at first it was like, the mini room, and then like the full room, and, so many, 9 weeks here, then 16 weeks, and then 20 weeks, It was kind of piecemeal, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And so that was on the creative part, and obviously when you're in production, you see something's not going to work and everybody has to rewrite it or whatever. And we're trying to consolidate locations and minimize company moves and make sure that we're making our days and, picking up stuff that we lost and such. You end up getting really creative with the writing, and you still have to as a producer, maintain that bird's eye view and that holistic sort of understanding of the whole story, so you maintain the integrity of the show.
Yeah. And Rocio, when you've set up projects, or when you've shepherded projects during your time at Hillman Grad or any other chapters of your career, maybe now as an independent producer as well, like, talk us through like the day-to-day concrete actions that you're taking day-to-day to set things up, to keep momentum, to keep train on the tracks from the executive side.
It really is of like, kind of as a producer, really looking at how many projects you have on your slate, where each project is, and kind of tailoring your day to the needs of those projects. So it really is a mix of like, if a project is earlier in development, of like, how are you helping the creator, the writer, filmmaker help shape it? Does that mean you're reading a new draft, an outline that comes in? Are you reading pitch pages? Are you giving notes? Are you jumping on a call? Are you, if it's, a little bit later in, its development stage where you feel, you need to be a little bit more strategic. If it already is, at a place where it's like, okay, I feel like the packaging is good, the pitch is good, are you then back channeling with buyers? Like, okay, would you guys hear this? Like, just making sure that you are keeping the trains on the tracks, that you're moving everything forward, and making sure that also that you're being honest and open with all the different parties that are involved as well. A writer who, of course, has reps, that everyone's on the same page.
Right.
And once it's set up, it's amazing, the sale, but that's not the end.
It's the beginning.
It's the beginning.
Yes.
So then it's about, it's like, how do you keep the momentum alive?
And it's interesting because like you never arrive, right? Every time you like reach one part of like the goalpost, you're like, great. Now you like take a beat and now there's another little mountain you have to climb. It's like always a mountain and you're pushing these boulders uphill. I feel like it only stops when like, I don't know, you retire. Like
it's important to celebrate the small wins.
Yeah.
Otherwise, time just flies and you didn't have fun.
Yeah.
I think all of us got into this to have some fun.
100%. And I think it's important to remember that. That's like a big pillar for me in anything I do. It's like, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's challenging. There's all of that reality. But like, what is the why? Like, why are we all here? Like we get to do this. We don't have to do this. We get to do this. I would love an example of what ways that authentic representation that we were just talking about, like that it translates into measurable growth, audience engagement, or innovation.
The entirety of the Fast and the Furious franchise.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a great example.
Great example. Yeah. Great example. Tip of her tongue. Wow, she just had that.
I mean, I think, again, it goes to that specificity, but that's universal. You look at, I know we already talked about it, but Beef, Shogun, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think that there are Insecure, right? Those are shows with really distinctive voices. But what they also had were huge stakes, because even Insecure, the stakes might have been silly because it was like, what do you do when you're high at Coachella? But it was the heartbreak, the heartache, right? And you just felt them. And I think that getting people to really feel and empathize and be in with your character is the key to or take them on a ride. I mean, Fast and Furious is a great example of that. Or where you look where audiences over-index, right? The Latino audience is way over-indexes in horror. But then we get like a La Llorona movie every year because that just is like what happens. But like, and not that they're bad, but like, but it's interesting to see that intersection of where we're showing up versus where we're over-indexing on screen and behind screen.
Yeah, I would even add Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a great example.
Too, just because, again, speaking to what I would have loved to have seen when I was a young, weird, only child. Like, I would have loved to have had a Wednesday growing up.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that she exists and that Jen Ortega exists today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Such a huge win. I know we talked a little bit about this already, but like, how do we advocate for these stories and for Latino stories without being pigeonholed? Not just from a casting perspective, but when we're in those conversations, that duality of just like the excellence that we need to have in what we do, advocating for Latino stories without it having to be inherently what people traditionally would think of as a Latino, quote unquote, story. Like, how do we advocate for that?
I think it's the writers.
Yeah.
You look at Issa Lopez, who HBO, she's an incredible writer and has been a magical playwright for years. HBO took a chance because they are more inclined to go to artists as opposed to perennials, right? And so I think that there's a really great example there of, look, the studio that was the first, I believe, Latina to win
And then
Frida.
And Frida was started out as somebody who worked at Point Grey and, moved up and had this great idea. And I think it's looking at people who are willing to take that risk. And unfortunately, you need the people who the gatekeepers trust to vouch.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
because if somebody walks in with Jodie Foster, if somebody walks in with Seth Rogen, right, it makes a very big difference.
Yes.
And then you see how that, but I do think it's writer first and finding someone with that vision that then people can believe in. I think one really exciting example right now is Ana Nogueira, who's all over the DC universe and has James Gunn advocating for her and is now cranking out these features and has put us on the map at that level, right? On the superhero big picture level. And I think, again, it's taking those chances and elevating those voices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'll add to that, we need people in the buyer's seat who are willing to, roll the dice and just be like, okay, I don't really know what that is, but go ahead, make your show,
How do we get to that in a risk-averse market?
There's very few
Fun
mavericks
question.
right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's what you were saying, the timing of what buyers want in the market, but that also is representative of like the timing and when I think it's like you have these lulls where you need to be perfecting your excellence so that when people are swinging in the other way of the pendulum, when they're a little more comfortable about the economics of the world and like, we're done merging all the studios and all of that, then you're ready to strike and you have that person who's been really perfecting their voice, find their ally, their gatekeeper ally who goes, wow, we've been looking for someone just like you. And it's like, I've been here lurking under the surface
Yeah, I mean, just
for 5-6 years, and now I'm ready.
It's a lot of time taking care of those relationships at buyers and and friendships. They eventually have become friendships, but also like who are those writers that you yourself as a producer are going to gamble on? There's been taking a good hard look at my slate and the writers that I'm fans of and who I work with, and knowing that as an independent producer, I can't afford an assistant. It's just me and cussing at ChatGPT who can't schedule for me for I'm going through all of them, seeing who can really which one can be very helpful. But I think it's important to say like, okay, I'm gonna put all of this time and energy. These chips are going to be on Stephen Reyes. I really like this young writer named Stephen Reyes. I'm going to put a bunch of chips over here on Adrian Alejandro Cruz. I'm going to put a bunch of chips over here on Louisa Leshik because she's over here. If this doesn't sell, Sonia, I'm retiring. And I'm like, this has to be the one. So I don't know, people I really believe in.
Yeah.
And then just making sure that the creative is excellent. So
yeah. Part of this change and part of this advocacy comes from like the executive leadership, the folks on the inside. And one thing that I think deeply concerns me is with all the contraction and the lack of jobs and sort of the middle tier, the mid-range of executives kind of being squished, how do we continue to propel up and move upwards and bring up the next generation of diverse executives, not just Latina executives, to make sure that we have those people on the inside, on the buyer side, on the financier side, who can help advocate for these decisions.
What's interesting with that is I made the jump. I was a buyer for a very, very long time, and I kept buying beautiful busted pilots with Greg Berlanti and Sarah Schechter, and we got very close. And Sarah very lovingly convinced me to go over to the dark side and become a seller and become a producer. And what better place to learn the ropes than with Greg and Sarah? But what I was noticing is that the stuff that was coming to me as a buyer wasn't fully cooked. And so by the time we'd get it, even if we bought it, there were other things that were always going to be more polished and more ready.
Right.
Or when it came time to staff, by the time I got a staff list, they might be like looking for one mid-level writer, but the staff list was done. And as soon as I got over to Berlanti, I was like, oh man, we can decide who we're giving this book to in the first place.
Right.
Oh, cool. When we're staffing this series, I'm the one sending the showrunners' names, right? And so it was, I think part of, And so I'm assuming my incidence is not insular to me, right? A lot of the inclusivity that should exist on the buying side ends up, you look at I know a lot of people personally who end up on the selling side because they can get their hands in it more and they can shape it up. And so I guess there needs to be more of everybody to balance that.
Yeah.
Because I loved being a buyer. It was a great experience and it was great to be able to be that champion on the inside. But it also was, how much can I do in this amount of time when projects from heavyweights are coming in?
Right.
How do I do that? And then it was like, especially when working Greg, it's like, well, let's put a heavyweight on this project from the beginning. But I do think that that's part of the hard part, is I think that that's some of the attrition that you've seen, not just in the contraction, but also in where people feel like they can make more of an impact.
Interesting. What have been some of the biggest barriers and most promising breakthroughs for executives in Hollywood?
I mean, shout out to Joey Chavez.
Oh, yeah.
Who
Icon.
is an incredible human being. A great, speaking of, with Flight Attendant, a lot of all of what we were talking about earlier with Rosie and all that, like that experience with Joey was amazing. And I think that he's somebody who, because the other thing that we don't have time to discuss, but like is also classism and generational wealth and all of these things. And I think, Joey's mother was a police officer, right? And he has this amazingly grounded perspective. And even though he knows how to play the game and to run in those circles, I feel like Joey gets the reality of what inclusivity means, what we're up against, and how to also make sure that it's commercial. And it makes me very happy to see Joey in that, at the Emmys, there were shouts out to Joey, and I was so happy to see it because it's well-deserved. I know, for example, Lauren LeFranc, who runs The Penguin, I've known for a very long time, and Joey, I introduced her to Joey when he was a junior executive at NBC, and he has stayed a champion of hers and kept courting her and trying to find things. And then the thing they found was a massive hit.
Yeah.
And so seeing him not give up and really be a champion makes me wish that there were more Joeys out there.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And also with Lauren and the Penguin too, like just a moment to talk about, you helped create NBC's Writers on the Verge, which helped launch her career, and also of Lee Sung-jin, who did Beef, and a bunch of others. Like, I don't know what year that was, how long ago that was, but
2006.
Okay.
Well, not her year necessarily,
but that's when you started.
The program started, yeah.
Okay, that's when I moved to LA, so that was a long time ago. But
so you're saying I'm old because
I'm saying you are a legend because you've been here, and look at what you've done to orchestrate and how long you've been advocating, but also how long it takes, right? These were people that back then were just like anyone else, entry level, who were just trying to find their voice. And the time that it takes to create a Lauren LeFranc, for these stars to align, the moment to be right, for all of these things to happen, I yearn for like the quantity within the quality. You know what I mean? We need like 10 of those per year. We need 10 Laurens. We need 10 Lees. We need like 10 Joeys per year to be able to have a few of those breakouts on a yearly basis.
I think that peak TV skewed people's perception of how many writers are actually huge in writing and working at any time.
Yeah.
I think there were a lot more shows before all of this, but then that big bubble that we all lived through, and you saw so many people selling shows and so many people getting staffed, and the real reality of it is, how many Lauren LeFrancs are there in that whole group of writers? Not as many as you would imagine.
I think, just to speak to Writers on the Verge, which like remains my favorite job I've ever had. Not that I want to lose the current one I have, but with Lauren was Pete Minchelli's assistant at CAA. Sunny was a page in the NBC page program. Lauren's writing partner at the time, Rafe Judkins, who ran Wheel of Time, was the researcher on SVU. Rashad Rassani, who just re-upped his overall at 20th Today. Okay, and these were all in the same class of people, by the way.
Incredible.
Rashad was a script coordinator on this Rand Rabbit show called Life. And with them, that was why we called it Writers on the Verge, because I knew the process is already hard enough. How can you find people that are this close
on the verge
to making it? And another alum of ours, Meredith Averill, just was announced as the writer for Fourth Wing, which is huge. And
wow, yeah.
What all of those people had in common, besides being lovely human beings, because I didn't want to spend a lot of nights with not lovely human beings, but they were so distinctive. And I think that's what some of it comes down to, both as executives and as producers and as writers, directors. They all were, and not to say, like, they were voicey, right? They each had really specific voices and personalities and brands. And that made it easier for me to market them and to find where their niche was. And then obviously they had enough core talent that they didn't actually need me in the first place. But I think that looking at it now, right, we're out of the bubble. And so that noise is really important again. That idea of being so distinctive that there is no other you. And whether that's in front of the camera or behind the camera, or just in any job now, but being distinctive and having your own specific brand, I think, is critical across the entire job industry right now.
But that takes time. It takes time to find your brand. It takes time to find your voice. And
they just need to keep writing and keep all of that early stuff to themselves. Honestly, I'll just be very honest. Like, Rocio and I worked at a place where we were basically competitive readers. Like, everybody was just duking it out, like reading, and trying to find the best script.
And how often did you find that? Like, what was the volume and the percentage, if you could average it out?
I mean, it was a lot of tracking people for progress as well. Like, I'm like, oh, I really like this, but, they're not quite on the level yet, and I'd say maybe one, for me, it was like one every 6 months that it just keeping, and we were reading like 30 scripts a week.
Yeah. I would say it was mostly tracking. But it's not
there yet.
We'll get them signed, perhaps, and develop with them. And then, like, do they have the stamina to go through the actual drafts of development, Because I don't know about you guys, but nowadays people will start kind of hemming and hawing after like 4 or 5 drafts. And we've seen people go 23 drafts. And that's kind of sometimes what it takes, often what it takes.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's almost like the bubble that we were in also gave a lot of folks a false sense of confidence, because so many jobs were created where it's like you're getting this amazing opportunity that you've never had before to show run or to like be elevated so quickly, but you didn't necessarily earn that place. And then it's hard to sustain once you're in those opportunities, because the reality of what it takes to be excellent when there is a contraction and there is only a few slots is quite, I think, jarring for a lot of folks.
And that's when being Latino in this industry becomes not a problem, but like there's an obstacle for you. So you're a Latino writer who has been staffed on something and you bump up couple times, right? You're now a mid-level writer and you get sent a set or something goes wrong, you don't get a second chance.
Yeah.
Whereas, our regular guys or, our white guys will get 2 or 3. How many times have we seen somebody's movie bomb?
Right.
And they get 2 or 3 chances.
That's right.
Those things are not afforded to us.
No. Yeah. And there was a time, I think, when you had a little bit more flexibility in that, when, especially on the series side, right, where you were getting 20 episodes and you did have a little bit more at-bats. But now there's so many less of that. And even like writers getting to cover set is like a whole other thing, which we don't even have time to get into, that they don't get the opportunity to read those reps in either. So,
and they're supposed to have they're supposed to be building those skills while they're at those levels. And, it used to be 22 episodes. Now it's 10,
if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about LatinaSquad. This wonderful community that Christine Davila has really gone out of her way to create for all of us out of a need that she felt. And I think the folks that I gravitate towards are people that like see a need, see that there's like a fire, and they're just like, we're going to put out the fire. We're not going to wait for somebody to come figure it out for us. Like, no one's showing up. The cavalry isn't coming for any of us. We know this, but especially for women, especially for us. And I really applaud that she's mounted this coalition of incredible executives that's brought community, leadership, friendships, and so many other kinds of ships into our lives. For you guys, what value has the squad brought to your professional life? And more importantly, how does it actually change the business that you do, not just the support you receive?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can speak to that very clearly. When we first started doing LatinaSquad, we'd have these fire pit sessions where you'd say a win and a need, and you go around and some people you've known for years, some people you don't know, and through meeting those amazing people, as we were starting up Mediapro, I was looking for executives. I was lucky enough Francesca Riccani, who was at Apple, came over to our team. Gira Villaro, who was at Pablo Larraín's company, she is now on my team. We needed a reader for a little while we were building up the team. And Suzanne McCormick, who was in LatinaSquad, came over to help. And not that, trust me, we've not lots of not LatinaSquad executives there, but it was a database of people I didn't know existed until then.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you see like the Harvard Lampoon guys, right? You see the USC Mafia, like you see these other groups. Emerson, for some reason, has a real tight squad, right? And you see these places, but there hadn't really been the same one, especially for Latina executives. So I think professionally, it's been huge to be able to reach out and just have that many amazing women right at your fingertips that's nothing I had ever, especially as usually being the only one in the room.
Yeah.
It's amazing to be in a room full of those women.
Yeah.
Within this business, and just because of how fast things operate, being able to build community and also being able to find wonderful executives that you can reach out to about questions and not feel like, am I asking a dumb question? And being able to have a real conversation about a strategy. And so Christine has done such a wonderful job about curating different panels, like having a business affairs panel. And that was so helpful for me, especially when reading contracts. It feels like genuinely a safe space.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Christine Davila is a rock star. I have a tendency to like work through everything like kind of a freight train, and then she makes me kind of stop and like look up and smell the champurrado and I, like Rocio says, like you just feel very comfortable when you're there, and it's a safe space. And something that was really helpful to me was the transparency where we kind of all talk about negotiations and our salaries and that sort of thing. It kind of was illuminating and helped me understand where I was being undervalued at that time. So
what you're talking about, there's a really great example of that in action. One of the members of LatinaSquad was up for a new job, and she reached out to not the whole group, but to a smaller group and said, this is what I'm getting offered. I don't think I can ask for more. And given what the job was and what other people who did similar jobs were making, and us all putting our information together, she ended up getting double her initial offer and being compensated what she should have been compensated from the start. And the thing is, when people exist in isolation, you don't feel safe asking other people those questions. And that was a really eye-opening for me. And obviously she was stoked when that happened. And seeing it, like, that's a real huge action to come out of it.
Yeah. Really changing the way that we do business and like conduct ourselves. And to earlier topics, like how we're consistently elevating ourselves because we have to like have that growth. I find that so beautiful because I've always told that I feel like I'm an outsider who like snuck into LatinaSquad because I didn't have, I know it's shocking, but that's like my own thing to deal with in therapy because I always feel like an outsider. But, but no, like I didn't come up the development side like a lot of the women there traditionally. You know, I came up in a very different world where community looked very different to me. And so when I did become an executive at Issa Reyes and meeting so many of you who had like been in it for your whole careers, and being able to pull some of you aside and go, how do I navigate this situation? Or what does this mean? Or who should I know at this agency? I'm doing all these generals. Like, who are the folks that I should be actually prioritizing? Like that, even that's something that's simple. And just having that shorthand and that shortcut and that safe space to ask. And conversely, having so many people be able to lean on experiences that I had that maybe they didn't have and go, how do I navigate this situation on set? How do I befriend the line producer? How do I really, you know what I mean? And just us being able to really put our minds together as like a brain trust and be like, here's like 5 brilliant brains to your point on like how you navigate X situation. And you learn from that experience in a way that just like compounds, I think, like growth. As we look forward, right? What do you think success looks like for the next generation of executives coming up?
I like how this young generation is so about their mental health. I think that's really important. I think knowing that what's truly expected of you in this job, though, it can't be done in a 40-hour week. So if you want to be on the development side, and maybe I'm wrong, Erika, I'm curious to hear what you have to say. If you're coming on to the development side and you're into narrative design and you really want to champion the stories, just know that you're kind of still working around the clock. And do you like homework forever? That's what I tell people. So, and I don't think AI, I obviously use it as my terrible assistant, Sonita. But I don't think AI is ever going to replace human perception or human taste. And you're still gonna, like, reading is the superpower. Your taste is your superpower. You're still gonna have to outread everybody. But I do see a future where, you know, people have a little more agency and are more gentle with themselves and with each other.
Yeah,
So.
to speak to your point, when I started out at NBC, it was with this just like murderer's row of amazing female executives, and Catherine Pope and Erin Wernberg and Katie O'Connell and Renata Radford and all of these, just Jane Wiseman, who's now running Paramount, and they were all like 31. And I was in my early 20s, and they were moms who were killing it and doing everything. And I was like, there's absolutely no way I will ever be able to become one of these women. Like, I've got a ticking clock. And so I think what I like about this generation and the next wave, and I'd love to see more of, is, you know, I had set these really strict rules for myself because I was a manager at 25. I was a director at 28. I got VP on my 30th birthday.
Wow.
And then I was like, okay, I'm going to be an SVP by 35 and then an EVP or running a department by 40. Done. And then what I realized was, A, that didn't happen. But also, none of those women evolved into orbs of light. We're not Pokemon, right? Those women who are all still incredible women are still working, right? But there was no ascension. And I think that it reset my brain because I was like, oh, right. Like, it really hit the, you know, marathon, not a sprint situation of, oh, I have to be in this for a while, longevity. And I think looking at the next generation, now that we have more tech companies, which we can talk about that another time, but the titles aren't the same, right? We're not in that same title grabbing place, right? People who are really, really, really important at Netflix are directors, right? People who are very important at Amazon are senior creative executive. Titles that any of us would have thrown fits about when I was starting out.
Yeah.
And I think the good news is that then it's about your accomplishments, not your title. And I think that what I hope with the next wave is that they can understand that. And I also see, which amazes me, they take vacations.
Yeah.
My VP was just gone for 2 weeks in Europe.
And didn't read, right?
No. And I'm proud of her for it. Because I would have never, I still don't have the bravery to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think what I'm curious to see about as they come into more power, with that perspective, what does that look like? Because I think that gives me a lot of hope for the generation under them.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it was well said.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay, as we close out, what do you think entrepreneurs and business leaders outside of our industry can learn from executives like you guys? How you lead, how you collaborate, how you approach business?
I think one of the things that they can learn is years ago, I read Michael J. Fox's autobiography, and he talked about the people who knew him as Marty McFly and the people who knew him as Alex P. Keaton. Again, these might be things that no one knows because I'm old. But the people who knew him from the movies saw him as this giant, right? And would bow and be very whatever. And then the people who knew him as Alex P. Keaton would give him noogies. And there's something about television, and I think that this can be taken through to lots of different industries. It is a privilege to be invited into someone's home. It is a privilege to grow with people in their families and in their homes and to become a part of their families. And sadly, Alexa is a part of families now, right? Cheerios is a part of families, just like these TV shows. And I think the appreciation that television has towards, we work so hard to make sure that people want to keep inviting us back. And I think that there's something to the intimacy of being at, now people watch things on their devices and stuff, but when everyone would gather around the TV or watch TV while they were eating dinner, and, it was so communal to that family. And I think the idea that they saw you as one of their family, and I think in general, because of technology and things like that, when things can feel impersonal, the more you can make your product feel like part of someone's life and family, not a tool, but as a member of that family, I think that's a big, I think that's a huge takeaway from the industry.
I love that. That's a real respect for the audience, a love and a deep appreciation of the audience. That's great, Erika. I was just gonna say, because I was thinking very much managing people and stuff. It's I'm really concerned with the disparity from people working at the very bottoms of companies to the CEOs, and I think just kind of as somebody who I'm at my best when I'm in the middle of a set of 300 people. It's none of us are as strong as all of us, and just take care of your people. And you're the captain of the ship, and make sure that you're you're there to help them weather the storm. That's kind of how we approach producing. I think most producers do. So,
I would say, leading with, I think just building off of Sonia, leading with honesty. I think we're a business of relationships, and making sure that the relationships that you have are those very real and honest relationships, because those are how you build, your career. I think with those real and honest relationships, and kind of just I think being able to sort of within your companies and within those managerial positions, it's how do you, as a CEO, looking from the top to the bottom, how are you honest with, the people who work for you, and how are you looking at the relationships that you're building within your company?
Yeah. Well, thank you all for being. We appreciate it. This has been a lovely conversation. If you can end with just something that's bringing you joy and optimism right now, could be anything in your life, could be something you've seen, could be art, could be wherever that question takes you.
I just saw Kiss of the Spider Woman, and I really liked Tonatia's performance. I thought it was fantastic. I hope people really love it.
Yeah, it comes out this weekend, so we'll go see it.
Mine is the amount of times my children and my family have all watched K-pop Demon Hunters.
Yeah.
And it is
So
a bop
good.
every time. It is a joy every time. I think Sony Animation is just killing it in general. It gives me hope that these changes can be used for good.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes me really happy that a bunch of badass ladies singing K-pop songs, who are literally fighting for good, but that the message is that we accept the good and the bad in ourselves. Like, I was just like, this is so bonus points,
Yeah.
final round.
I would say for me, what has brought me joy is to know that a lot of younger filmmaker friends of mine and younger creators have found different avenues to create. And that's brought a lot of hope and a lot of joy into our earlier conversation of like everything that is being made now. It's like, how can we, sort of save all of that and wait for the pendulum to swing the other way
Yeah.
to be ready. And it's nice to know that there are creators who are doing that now.
Yeah.
And that's brought a lot of hope.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Thank you. First Square Roundtable.